Mark Wahlberg denied entry to first class. The passenger who mocked him instantly regrets it. The unmistakable scent of rain-soaked asphalt filled the air at LaGuardia Airport as Mark Wahlberg, dressed in a simple gray hoodie and jeans, made his way through the terminal. He'd just spent 14 hours on a movie set, working with underprivileged kids as part of a charity program he'd quietly been running between takes. His body ached, but his heart was full. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't let you through," declared the first-class gate agent, her voice carrying across the waiting area. "This section is for first-class passengers only." She barely glanced at the crumpled boarding pass in his hand, her eyes fixed on his casual attire. A businessman in an impeccable suit snickered from his nearby seat, his Rolex catching the fluorescent lighting as he gestured dismissively. Finally, someone keeping the riffraff where they belong, he stage-whispered to his companion, loud enough for everyone to hear. His perfectly pressed collar and matching silk pocket square spoke of privilege and entitlement. Celebrity or not, some people need to learn their place. The words carried decades of ingrained prejudice, each syllable weighted with assumptions about worth and belonging. Around them, other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some averting their eyes while others watched with that peculiar mix of discomfort and curiosity that public confrontations tend to inspire. A young mother pulled her children closer, using the moment as a whispered teaching opportunity about kindness. An elderly gentleman in military dress blues squared his shoulders, clearly disapproving of the businessman's behavior, but maintaining his dignified silence. The morning had started like any other day on set in New York, with the first hints of dawn barely touching the city skyline. Mark had arrived while most of the city still slept, the weight of purpose driving him forward despite having only caught a few hours of rest. The production of his latest film, a gritty drama about second chances and redemption, had evolved into something far more meaningful than just another entry in his filmography. The script, which followed the journey of a former athlete mentoring troubled youth, had struck a deep chord with him from the first read-through. The set, housed in a converted warehouse in Queens, buzzed with the controlled chaos of a professional film production. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, setting up lights and adjusting equipment while Mark reviewed his lines. But it was the group of teenagers gathered in the corner, wide-eyed and eager, that truly energized the space. They were part of his quietly running charity program, each one selected not for their existing knowledge of filmmaking, but for their raw potential and burning desire to learn. Marcus, a lanky 16-year-old with keen eyes and careful movements, had particularly caught Mark's attention. The boy possessed an innate understanding of visual storytelling that reminded Mark of his own early creative instincts. During breaks between scenes, Mark had watched Marcus direct his peers in small practice shoots, his natural leadership abilities shining through despite his initial shyness. The rain had started around noon, transforming the city into a glistening landscape of reflected lights and shadows. Water drummed steadily against the warehouse roof as Mark worked one-on-one with Marcus, showing him how to frame shots that told stories beyond words. The boy's quick grasp of complex concepts and his thoughtful questions revealed a depth of understanding that went far beyond his years. "It's like you said, Mr. Wahlberg," Marcus had commented while adjusting a camera angle. "Every frame is a chance to show someone's truth." The statement had stopped Mark in his tracks. It was exactly the kind of insight that reminded him why this program meant so much. Throughout the afternoon, Mark had observed the other students as well. Sarah, a quiet girl with a poet's eye, had been meticulously storyboarding a short film about her grandmother's immigration journey. The twins, Kevin and Keith, worked in perfect synchronization as they practiced different filming techniques, their shared passion for documentaries evident in every choice they made. Now, standing in the airport terminal hours later, those memories of the day's events swirled in Mark's mind as he faced yet another reminder of how quickly people could judge based on appearances. The gate agent's dismissive glance and the businessman's sneering comment weren't just directed at him. They represented an attitude he'd fought against his entire life. The businessman who had made the riffraff comment sat straighter in his leather seat, clearly expecting, perhaps even hoping for, a confrontation. His companion, A woman in an equally expensive suit touched his arm as if sensing the tension building in the air. Around them, other passengers watched with varying degrees of interest and discomfort, some already reaching for their phones to capture whatever might unfold. But Mark wasn't thinking about creating a scene. His mind was on Marcus and the other kids, on their dreams and the obstacles they faced. He thought about how many times they'd been judged before they could even speak, how many doors had been closed before they could reach for the handle. The gate agent shifted uncomfortably behind her podium, her earlier confidence wavering as the silence stretched. Her eyes darted between Mark's casual attire and the businessman's obvious wealth, a visible representation of the prejudices they were all grappling with. Instead of responding to the businessman's taunt, Mark turned to the gate agent with a gentle smile that carried the weight of years of similar experiences. "Ma'am, I understand you're doing your job, and I respect that. Would you mind taking a closer look at my boarding pass?" The agent's face flushed deep red as she actually read the ticket this time, her fingers trembling slightly as she realized her mistake. "Mr. Wahlberg, I'm so sorry. Of course, you're in first class. Please go right ahead." Her voice had lost its earlier dismissive edge, replaced by genuine remorse. The businessman's smug expression faltered, but Mark wasn't finished. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, quickly navigating to the photos from his day. Walking over to the businessman with measured steps, he spoke in a voice warm with genuine interest rather than confrontation. The same voice he'd used earlier when encouraging Marcus to believe in his dreams. "Would you like to see what riffraff looks like?" He showed him pictures of the children's charity event he'd just left. Kids from struggling neighborhoods learning about filmmaking, their faces bright with possibility. Each swipe revealed another moment of transformation. Marcus directing his first scene, Sarah mastering the boom microphone, the twins working together to frame the perfect shot. The photos told a story that went beyond simple charity work. They captured moments of discovery, of young people finding their voices and their vision. In one image, Marcus stood behind a professional camera, his posture radiating confidence as he prepared to call action for the first time. Another showed Sarah interviewing her grandmother, tears of connection visible in both their eyes. "These kids remind me of myself at their age," Mark continued, his voice carrying no judgment, only an invitation to understand. "The girl in this photo? Sarah?" She wrote and directed a 3-minute film about her grandmother's journey from Vietnam. "The twins here? They're developing a documentary about their neighborhood's history." "And Marcus?" He paused, selecting a particular photo that captured the moment the boy had first called action on set. Continued in next response due to character limit. Now, standing in the airport terminal, those memories of the day's events swirled in his mind as he faced yet another reminder of how quickly people could judge based on appearances. The gate agent's dismissive glance and the businessman's sneering comment weren't just directed at him. They represented an attitude he'd fought against his entire life. The waiting area had grown quieter, the ambient sounds of rolling luggage and conversation dimming as more passengers turned their attention to the unfolding scene. Mark could feel the weight of their stares, some sympathetic, others curious, a few even reaching for their phones, anticipating drama. But drama wasn't what he had in mind. He thought about Marcus and the other kids he'd worked with today, about how many doors had been closed in their faces simply because of where they came from or how they looked. The businessman's words, "Some people need to learn their place," echoed in his mind, reminding him of similar phrases he'd heard throughout his journey from street kid to Hollywood star. Mark felt dozens of eyes turned toward him. He'd faced far worse in his journey from the streets of Boston to Hollywood, but something about this moment struck a deeper chord. It wasn't about him. It was about every person who'd ever been judged by their appearance rather than their character. The memories of his own path flashed through his mind. The rough streets of Dorchester, where he'd learned early on that appearance often led to assumptions. The countless auditions where directors had initially dismissed him. The years of proving himself not just as an actor, but as a person of substance. Each step had taught him the value of responding to judgment with grace rather than anger. Marcus's face appeared in his thoughts again. Just hours ago, the teenager had confided in him about being told he didn't look like a filmmaker when he'd tried to join his school's media club. The boy's words echoed in Mark's mind. Sometimes I feel like I'm wearing a label I can't take off." The parallel to this moment was striking. The gate agent shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence wavering as the silence stretched. The businessman's companion, a woman in an equally expensive suit, touched his arm as if sensing the tension building in the air. But instead of the confrontation everyone seemed to expect, Mark found himself thinking about the transformation he'd witnessed in Marcus when the boy finally got his hands on a professional camera. Instead of responding to the businessman's taunt, Mark turned to the gate agent with a gentle smile that carried the weight of years of similar experiences. "Ma'am, I understand you're doing your job, and I respect that. Would you mind taking a closer look at my boarding pass?" The agent's face flushed deep red as she actually read the ticket this time, her fingers trembling slightly as she realized her mistake. "Mr. Wahlberg, I'm so sorry. Of course, you're in first class. Please go right ahead." Her voice had lost its earlier dismissive edge, replaced by genuine remorse. The businessman's smug expression faltered, but Mark wasn't finished. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, quickly navigating to the photos from his day. Walking over to the businessman with measured steps, he spoke in a voice warm with genuine interest rather than confrontation. The same voice he'd used earlier when encouraging Marcus to believe in his dreams. "Would you like to see what riffraff looks like?" He showed him pictures of the children's charity event he'd just left. Kids from struggling neighborhoods learning about filmmaking, their faces bright with possibility. Each swipe revealed another moment of transformation. Marcus directing his first scene. A young girl named Sarah mastering the boom microphone. Twins Kevin and Keith working together to frame the perfect shot. These kids remind me of myself at their age. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you, treating you with dignity, to change everything. Mark's voice carried no judgment, only an invitation to understand. The girl in this photo, Sarah, she wrote and directed a 3-minute film about her grandmother's journey from Vietnam. The twins here, they're developing a documentary about their neighborhood's history. And Marcus, he paused, selecting a particular photo that captured the moment the boy had first called action on set. The businessman's face transformed as he scrolled through the photos, his earlier disdain melting into something more complex. His companion leaned in to look, her own expression softening as she took in the stories captured in each image. Around them, other passengers had drawn closer, drawn in by the unexpected turn of events. I had no idea," the businessman managed, his voice thick with emotion. His fingers lingered on a photo of Marcus helping a younger student position a camera. "Mr. Wahlberg, I was completely out of line." "Please call me Mark," he replied, settling into the seat next to them. The tension in the air had dissolved, replaced by something more profound. "And would you like to hear something interesting about those kids?" For the next 20 minutes, as other passengers boarded, Mark shared stories about the youth program he'd been developing. He spoke about Marcus's hidden talent for visual storytelling, about Sarah's determination to honor her family's history through film, about the twins' vision for preserving their community stories. His voice carried the same passion he'd felt on those Boston streets years ago, when someone had first seen past his exterior to recognize his potential. The businessman, who introduced himself as James Richardson, found himself pulled into the conversation. As Mark spoke about the program's mission to provide opportunities in the film industry for underprivileged youth, James's corporate facade crumbled further. He shared his own story of growing up in a small apartment above his parents' struggling grocery store, of the mentor who had helped him secure his first internship in finance despite his secondhand suits and thick Brooklyn accent. "I became what I once resented," James admitted, running a hand over his perfectly knotted tie. "I forgot what it was like to be on the other side of those judgments." His companion, Susan, squeezed his hand in understanding. As they finally boarded the plane, the transformation that had begun at the gate continued to unfold. James turned to Mark, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine humility. "I came this close to being that guy, the one who makes judgments without knowing the whole story. Thank you for showing me a better way." Mark patted him on the shoulder, remembering how Marcus had done the same to a nervous freshman who joined their program that afternoon. "We've all been there. The important thing is being willing to see people differently when given the chance. The first-class cabin became an unexpected continuation of their conversation. As the plane taxied toward takeoff, Mark shared more details about his vision for expanding the youth program. James, it turned out, sat on the board of several educational foundations. Susan, who had remained quietly observant throughout their exchange, was a former teacher who had left education for corporate law. What if we could scale this? James proposed, his business mind now engaged in a different kind of opportunity. Not just filmmaking, though that's brilliant, but other creative industries too. Give kids a chance to see themselves in careers they might never have considered. The flight attendant who moved through the cabin, serving pre-takeoff drinks, found herself witnessing something remarkable. Instead of the usual polite silence of first-class passengers absorbed in their devices, she observed an animated discussion about opportunity, mentorship, and the power of seeing beyond surface appearances. Later, she would share on social media how she witnessed Mark Wahlberg and a businessman exchanging contact information, making plans to collaborate on expanding the youth program to more cities. She never mentioned the initial confrontation. Instead, she wrote about how a chance encounter at an airport led to a partnership that would go on to change hundreds of young lives. As the plane cruised at altitude, Mark pulled out his laptop and showed James and Susan more detailed documentation about the program. The curriculum he developed went beyond just technical skills. It included mentorship components, life skills training, and even a small stipend for participants to ensure that economic barriers wouldn't prevent talented kids from participating. The hardest part isn't teaching them about filmmaking, Mark explained, scrolling through a presentation. It's helping them believe they belong in these spaces. Every time they walk onto a set or into a production meeting, they're fighting against years of being told they don't fit in. Susan leaned forward, her legal mind already working through possibilities. We could structure it as a non-profit educational foundation, she suggested. That would open up additional funding streams, tax benefits for donors, and partnership opportunities with established institutions. James nodded enthusiastically. I'm thinking about my contact at the Riverside Foundation. They've been looking for innovative educational initiatives to support. Something like this, combining practical skills with mentorship and real-world experience. It's exactly what they're after. The 3-hour flight became an impromptu strategy session. By the time they began their descent, the outline of something much bigger had taken shape. James had already drafted an email to his foundation contacts on his tablet, while Susan had created a preliminary framework for the organizational structure. But it was Mark's phone call to Marcus during their brief layover that truly crystallized the importance of what they were building. He put the call on speaker so James and Susan could hear the teenager's excitement about the day's filming. "Mr. Wahlberg, you won't believe what happened after you left," Marcus exclaimed. "Remember that shot I was struggling with? I figured out how to make it work. I used what you said about finding the right angle to tell the story, and it just clicked. Sarah and the twins helped me set it up, and even Ms. Rodriguez from the community center said it looked professional." The pride in Marcus's voice brought tears to Susan's eyes. James reached for her hand, both of them remembering their own moments of breakthrough, those pivotal instances when someone's belief in them had transformed into belief in themselves. "That's fantastic, Marcus," Mark replied, catching James's eye with a knowing look. "Actually, I've got some people here who might be interested in seeing that shot. How would you feel about presenting your work to a few industry professionals next week?" Marcus's stunned silence, followed by an enthusiastic, "Are you serious?" made them all smile. It was the sound of a door opening, of possibility becoming reality. Over the next 6 months, the chance encounter at LaGuardia Airport would catalyze a transformation that none of them could have predicted. The youth program expanded from a single set in New York to 10 cities across the country. James's connections in the financial world, combined with Susan's legal expertise and Mark's industry knowledge, created a robust foundation that attracted support from major studios, tech companies, and educational institutions. Marcus became the program's first student ambassador, his natural talent for storytelling now matched by growing confidence and leadership skills. The short film he completed during those first weeks, a poignant story about his neighborhood's forgotten heroes, went on to win a Youth Film Festival award, and attracted attention from several film schools. The gate agent who had initially denied Mark entry to first class became one of the program's most dedicated volunteers, using her free time to help coordinate travel arrangements for students attending film workshops and industry events. Her initial mistake had become a catalyst for her own journey of growth and giving back. But perhaps the most profound transformation was in James Richardson. The businessman who had sneered at riffraff became a passionate advocate for breaking down barriers in creative industries. His foundation work shifted focus to supporting arts education in underserved communities, and he often shared the story of his airport encounter as a reminder of the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. 1 year after their chance meeting, Mark, James, and Susan stood together at the program's first national showcase event. On stage, Marcus and his fellow student filmmakers presented their work to an audience that included studio executives, film school administrators, and potential donors. The films they showed told stories of resilience, hope, and the power of being seen for who you truly are. During the reception that followed, Mark overheard a conversation between Marcus and a young girl who reminded him of Sarah from that first day. She was asking Marcus if she could really become a director, given that she came from a neighborhood where most people never even finished high school. Marcus's response echoed the lessons of that rainy day at LaGuardia. "Let me show you something," he said, pulling out his phone to show her behind-the-scenes photos from his award-winning film. "It's not about where you come from or what you're wearing. It's about the stories you have to tell and believing you have the right to tell them." Standing there, watching the next generation pass on the lessons of dignity and possibility, Mark thought about how a moment of potential conflict had transformed into something so much more powerful. The businessman who had tried to put him in his place had instead found his own place in a movement for change. Sometimes the greatest regrets lead to the most meaningful transformations. And sometimes being denied entry becomes the doorway to something far more important than first class. In this case, it had opened the way to a future where talent and passion mattered more than appearances, where judgment gave way to understanding, and where the simple act of seeing people for who they truly are could change not just individual lives, but entire communities. The story of that day at LaGuardia Airport would be told many times over the years, not as a tale of confrontation or regret, but as a reminder that every interaction carries the potential for transformation. It became a cornerstone of the program's philosophy, that sometimes the most powerful changes begin with a simple choice to look past the surface and recognize the dignity in every person. 5 years after that fateful encounter, Mark found himself back at LaGuardia, this time accompanied by Marcus, who had grown from that uncertain teenager into a confident young filmmaker. They were there to welcome the newest cohort of program participants, 50 students from across the country, each selected for their passion and potential rather than their polish or pedigree. As they waited at the gate, Mark noticed a familiar face among the arriving passengers. The gate agent from that rainy day, now a regional coordinator for their program, was escorting a group of nervous-looking teenagers through security. She caught his eye and smiled, remembering how a moment of misjudgment had led her to find her true calling in mentoring young artists. James and Susan were there too, having flown in from different cities to participate in the orientation. James had long since traded his corporate armor for more casual attire, though his business acumen remained sharp as ever in service of their expanding mission. Susan had eventually left her law firm to become the foundation's full-time legal director, finding more fulfillment in protecting young artists' rights than in corporate litigation. As the new students gathered around, Marcus stepped forward to share his story. He spoke about that first day on set, about the magic of discovering his voice through the camera lens, and about the unexpected airport encounter that had helped create opportunities for so many others like him. 5 years ago, I thought I knew my place in the world, he told them, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. But what I've learned, what Mr. Wahlberg and this program taught me, is that your place is wherever your passion and talent take you. The only limits that matter are the ones we choose to believe in. One of the new students, a girl wearing a worn denim jacket covered in hand-drawn designs, raised her hand. But what if people don't take us seriously? What if they look at us and see what they want to see, not who we are? Mark watched as Marcus walked over to her, pulling out his phone just as Mark had done for James that day 5 years ago. "Let me show you something," Marcus said, displaying his festival awards, behind-the-scenes photos from his first professional directing job, and images of other program graduates succeeding in their chosen fields. "This is what happens when people look past the surface," Marcus explained. "This is what's possible when someone believes in you before you fully believe in yourself." As Mark observed this moment of passing the torch, he reflected on how a single interaction had rippled outward to touch so many lives. The program had now graduated over 1,000 students, many of whom had gone on to successful careers in film, television, and digital media. But more importantly, each of them had learned to see themselves and others beyond first impressions. The businessman who had once sneered at riffraff had become instrumental in changing the face of creative industry recruitment. James's influence had helped establish scholarship programs at major film schools, apprenticeship opportunities at leading studios, and mentorship networks that connected aspiring artists with industry veterans. The transformation that began at an airport gate had grown into a movement, proving that sometimes the most profound changes start with a simple moment of choosing understanding over judgment, possibility over prejudice, and humanity over appearances. And as Mark watched Marcus lead the new students toward their orientation session, he smiled at the perfect symmetry of it all. The story that began with denied entry had opened doors for countless others, creating a legacy that would continue to reshape lives for generations to come. One afternoon, long after the story had become the stuff of legend, a young intern at the foundation discovered the original viral tweet from the flight attendant who had witnessed it all. The post had garnered millions of impressions, but it wasn't the numbers that mattered. It was the thousands of replies from people sharing their own stories of transformation, of moments when someone had looked past their surface and seen their true potential. The story lives on not just in the successful careers of program graduates or the expanding reach of the foundation, but in countless small moments of recognition and respect. In airport terminals and boardrooms, in film sets and classrooms, people still tell the tale of how a denied entry to first class opened the door to something far greater. A reminder that every interaction carries the seed of transformation, waiting only for the courage to look beyond the surface and see the dignity in every human being. As for the gate agent, she still volunteers with the program, greeting each new cohort of students with a warmth born of understanding that appearances never tell the whole story. And sometimes, when asked about that rainy day at LaGuardia, she simply smiles and says, "Sometimes our biggest mistakes lead us to our greatest purpose." Because in the end, it wasn't just about access to first class or even about making it in Hollywood. It was about recognizing that every person carries within them the potential for greatness, waiting only for the moment when someone looks past the surface to see it. And sometimes, that recognition can come from the most unexpected places, even from a simple misunderstanding at an airport gate on a rainy New York afternoon.